the 30th of March. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dana. How are you today? I'm also known as the Nuclear Proctologist.org, and welcome to the Nuclear Scumbag Show. You can call in if you roll that way. 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. And we got a lot of news to get through. We're going to get to Kathleen Higley. Should make everybody want to vomit. Well, that's screwed up, eh? You hear that? The clicking is actually off. Okay, so we got a poll tonight at... Should the nuclear students have to work at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns before they can graduate? Gee, I thought that was a great idea. Obviously not everybody's going to agree with that. If you're in the nuclear industry and your children are in it, you're probably not going to like doing that. Oh, God. Kathleen Higley. You think with all the money she made being incredibly evil, she would have retired by now. Look at that death and disease factory over there. Death and disease factory right here. How can you put a farm around a nuclear power plant? Kind of demonic, sadistic, twisted engineering is that? Well, it's very clever if you want to make a lot of people sick, but the government, the nuclear industry wouldn't do that on purpose, would they? The government made this fake news broadcast about a nuclear attack on Indianapolis. And so now it's out there in the public sphere. Never seen before. I can't resist that. Let's see what the goblins have been up to. Right, in 1986, they created Mighty Derwinger, a secret exercise for terrorists.
We are now in day 4. You know that few details are available, but this much we know. A large portion of downtown Indianapolis remains evacuated. Now, reports are sketchy at this point, but we do know that apparently there are terrorists holed up in the downtown part of our city with nuclear devices. How many people, how many devices, we're not sure. But we have just learned here at the Channel 9 newsroom that a federal response team has been sent in to neutralize the threat. Let's go live now to reporter Ann Miller, who's out with Chopper 9 for the latest on this. Ann?
We're heading east towards downtown. Now, normally at this time of the morning, you'd see the beginnings of rush hour traffic. But this morning, the city is strangely still.
Do you see any traffic moving at all?
Yes, although the city has been evacuated, there are police down there in the streets making sure everyone stays out of town, and guards have been seated just in case.
And just how close can you get to where the terrorists are said to be moved up?
Well, the FBI and the police have forced off that neighborhood, and there's restricted airspace above it. We're headed in that direction now, but we can only approach it.
We've obviously lost our microwave link with Chopper 9. Can someone get on the two-way radio and see if they can contact Ann and see what's going on out there? In the meanwhile, I'd like to, again, caution our audience against over-concern.
Hard cases or what? December 1986, the Pentagon, the CIA, the FBI, Department of Energy, Every other federal agency you can think of came together in Indianapolis for an enormous fear-mongering fest known as Mighty Derwinger to simulate a nuclear terrorist attack. Nagasaki, Hiroshima should have had one of them, I guess, and explore how every agency would react and whether they would cooperate. What terrorist organization was that bombed Nagasaki, Hiroshima? I can't remember. The U.S. government, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, look at that right there, went so far as to record a fake news broadcast about a nuclear bomb exploding. They wanted to relive Hiroshima one more time, I suppose. Until now, no one outside of the government has seen the video. That tells you lots. And Gizmodo, which is a public relation firm, right? Like Popular Mechanics is a public relation firm, obtained the Mighty Derwinger footage through a Freedom of Information Act. So how did they know? Insiders. The National Nuclear Security Administration, which operated under the Department of Energy. They control all the nuclear. The government made this fake news broadcast. Yeah, that was really something. As you can probably guess from the name, the NNSA work is serious business. And when the U.S. started to see a sharp rise in terrorists, after 9/11 in the next decade, it was something like 400 plus alleged terrorist events in the United States by lone wolves. And they done a study on it, and all of them had FBI handlers. None of them had access to bomb materials, but the FBI handlers went ahead and got that for them too. Keep that fear alive after 9/11 so people wouldn't start asking questions. Questioning 911 even today is considered an act of terrorism. The team's mandate was to stand at the ready to deploy a group of experts anywhere in the country on a moment's notice. That's who probably Kathleen Higley was born out of this lot right there. Some inbreeding was probably going on and she was created. And when large public events happened and the nuclear experts were needed just in case, yeah, that sounds about right. NEST team members were the people who mobilized surveillance vehicles, helicopters, and other special equipment to sweep for anything radioactive. They do that now before all major, like the Grey Cups, and it's announced in all the papers. Don't worry if you see helicopters flying with things underneath them. It's just the government protecting your butt from terrorists. While the NNSA is still very much an active organization. Active! You got no idea what you're actually talking about. Active is being very polite. They changed the name to the Nuclear Emergency Support Team, is what we know them as. We do know real radioactive material was hidden around Indianapolis, because that's how they roll, in order to give the team something authentic to look for during their exercise. You know, with a beagle dog, you'll use real objects, right? They're basically dogs, right? And Gizmodo is now part of Geomedia, which is owned by a private equity firm, Great Hills Partner, which was spawned from Goldman Sachs. It's an American media holding company. And they got a bunch of popular go-to sites, and they scooped them up for the propaganda, right? Because you've got lots of them, then the propaganda goes out from there. Because people up and coming will parrot whatever they say. Private equity firm Great Hill Partners. Great Hill is an equity firm with $2.7 billion under management. And then it takes that money and scoops up these particular assets, not because of the investment per se, but because of propaganda. Make an amazing amount of money off something like that. How to make nuclear energy safe with Seaborg's. I'm not even going to try to butcher his name. I listened to, we'll play some of it here right now. Meeting rising energy requirements in a safe and climate-friendly way is one of the key challenges humanity needs to solve in a safe and climate-friendly way. Oh, they're such sweethearts, they care about you and the planet. First off, it's Harvard Business Review. It's not the spot you're going to go for good people. The key challenges humanity's need to solve. Danish, well, you can't solve it if you got nothing but public relation firms in charge, covering everything up. You got to admit you got a problem before you can fix it, right? Danish startup Seaborg Technologies. The propaganda's a bit thick here, so here we go. Let's get it over with.
Now, I've got a history with nuclear power. As a 10-year-old, I went on a school trip to visit Bradwell Nuclear Power Station in the north of Essex in the
ULK. So when he was 10 years old, he went to a nuclear power plant. That's like the last spot you should bring children, is a nuclear power plant with gamma shines, X-ray, neutron emission all over the place. It's not. They didn't bring them there because they're good people.
UK. Bradwell was a huge brutalist complex, large concrete cubes set by the banks of the River Blackwater.
And, and surrounded by farms, as far as you can see, right up to the boundary.
My friends and I received a tour of the facility, seeing the control room and receiving a goodie bag at the end of the day.
Oh, that's so adorable. Isn't that adorable? Got a goodie bag.
That leaving gift included booklets on the future of electricity.
We call them propaganda, right?
It would be too cheap to meter.
Too expensive to build. They're just the propaganda.
And stickers that declared my love of fission. Those stickers ended up on my door. Bradwell, an old
love of fishing. You got any idea how many fish each reactor actually kills in a year? You should look up the story of how Indian Point kills fish.
Design for a comparatively small nuclear power station was decommissioned in 2002 after 40 years of service.
Oh, what a fateful nuke tart that was. So 40 years of polluting farms, and that goes out and poisons and kills people.
A few years later, I was planning on visiting the Soviet Union as part of a school trip to practice my Russian language. As always, this 10-day trip would start in Moscow, but for the first time in years it would end not in Leningrad, as it was then known, but in the southern historic city of Volgograd. We were due to travel in mid-May 1986, but just a few weeks before our trip, the Soviet government grudgingly admitted that there had been a mishap at a nuclear reactor. A day or so later, Swedish scientists detected,
which is Chernobyl, of course,
a large radiation cloud across Europe, and the explosion.
It actually changed the sex ratio of all males and females in Europe, and who knows where else. But you can't do that without doing the same thing to all the species, right?
Exclusion and meltdown in Chernobyl reactor.
What do you mean by that is there's more males than females born, so there's less babies produced. And that's dramatic when you look at all the species.
To number 4 put paid to my excursion to Soviet Russia. But I remained fascinated by the prospects of nuclear fission as a source of energy. In 60 years of operating and nearly 90...
So he's proved that brainwashing works at that age, right? It's terrifying.
19 millennia of cumulative reactor years, there have only been 2 serious incidents.
Boy, he's so good. Now he said, I'm going to wind that back a little tiny bit. He's going to say there's only 2 accidents By the way, Santa Susana released 460 times more radiation than 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island officially radiated 2 million people. But it was the same as watching colored television for an extra year, said the lunatics. Said he got a millisieverts equal to watching color television for a whole year. So, like, these lunatics, there's no one to hold them accountable. There's no incentive to be honest. And because it's just a big joke to them, right? They bring on these characters like he's doing, tell you these insane stories of how he was brainwashed when he was 10 years old. So it's okay to be a bootlicking, cheerleading lapdog if you went to a nuclear power plant as a child.
Of cumulative reactor years, there have only been 2 serious incidents, that at Chernobyl and that at Fukushima. The former can be ascribed to the very poor construction, managerial and safety standards so common across the Soviet Union. The latter resulted in just 1 death from radiation exposure, but likely many more fatalities from the stresses and traumas of the sudden evacuation.
Bastard, eh? What a thing to say. So he's saying to 3,000 people who were forced out of their homes, their communities, they died from stress, not from radiation. They didn't move them out because they were going to be living in a lot of stress. They moved them out of there because of radiation, and they moved them out too late. And we've never seen thousands of people die during evacuation from hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones and earthquakes. And at times we've seen millions of people, up to 10, 15 million in the Philippines at a time, have to evacuate because of since Fukushima melted down, these storms are coming ashore at over 230 to 250 miles per hour. We don't have infrastructure with codes to build for that weather because that's not normal. Just let me play that last piece one more time because...
The latter resulted in just 1 death from radiation exposure, but likely many more fatalities from the stresses and traumas of the sudden evacuation.
Yeah, so we covered the last part of it, but only 1 death? Really? Really? Just hang on. Just 1 death, Dana. Extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac disease in Fukushima. The death rate might give the creeps to some people. This is 2012, by the way. There's actually one street there where 7 people dropped dead before 2012. There's an increase of 12,700 extra people in a month. And you can be sure this is not just 1 month, this is every month. 12,700 people dropped dead of heart attacks compared to any other year in those months. That's not all. I mean, look at all the other... The list goes on and on.
And of course, public opinion is a challenge here. So how do you go about changing public opinion as well?
Well, social engineering, right? What do you mean, how do you go about changing it? It's under siege all day, every day through that mass...
We are changing the public opinion. Since I was small, and it's been a while, because I'm not that young anymore, but since I was small, we have talking about climate issues. We have known about this for so long. And look at the issue. We have talked about the issues for so long, and it's still there. I am sick and tired of talking about climate. We don't need climate talking. We need climate action. So let's just go out and do it.
Right.
We just need to make it cheap enough that people would want it, and then we need to make it scalable. We don't need to change the public opinion on this. That will change when it's there and when they get cheap electricity. The public opinion will change.
Well, Troels Schoenfeld, from a series of accidental bad decisions to a pathway and an ambition to being one of the largest companies in the world, that's quite the journey. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine.
Well, his version is this is nuclear that is safe. Now, how many decades have we been told this one? And he says, you know, if there's an accident and now they're going to be on barges. We've talked about these before, just twice. This is the third time. And so they're a breakout company. Danish startup Seaborg Technologies' blueprint for the future of power uses a new type of nuclear reactor that is safe. That can be manufactured quickly and deployed on barges. Why on barges, though? What's that all about? They need a lot of water. The last thing you want is a reactor on a barge of any type, because you know fact they're going to just pollute the ocean. Deployed on barges to any location in the world. They also discuss how the anti-nuclear movement influenced their thinking about the future of energy, how the anti-nuclear movement. Yeah, without any examples. So that's not true, obviously, right? Oh, God. Kathleen Higley. She's actually a monster, but Kathleen Higley. Let me fix that. Let me try this here. That's a bit better, isn't it? Racist bad gene theory applied to people at Bayview Hunters Point. Now, we've covered the Navy Yard at Hunters Point quite a few times over the years. Speaking from the ivory towers of Oregon State University. Yeah, good old Oregon. They don't make evil like they do at Oregon State University anymore. Kathleen Higley. Yeah, I know everybody's out there groaning as I say it too. Come on, you got to cover it. She's in the news. Higley is a highly qualified independent resource available to the public. Highly qualified. She actually is. Incredible education. Unbelievable amount of accolades. Stunning master of language. And the way she lies is almost, at times she almost seems human. It's just weird. Kathleen Higley. And friends. We'll cut out a few clips of this stuff for the rest of the show. What's going on there? I don't know. We'll get there. Where the hell is Miles O'Brien to? He's supposed to be there. So Kathleen Higley's right here. Robert Gale is there. All the local parasites are together. Always good for a good time.
You know, there's probably someone on the panel foolish enough to address that question. But we are radiation safety professionals, and the licensing of nuclear power plants is really kind of out of our scope. I'm going to ask Dr. Vetter to talk briefly here. You haven't had an opportunity. I know you're an expert in dosimetry and measurements. So,
well, the reason I haven't had an opportunity to talk is because there are no problems in the medical field.
How did everybody know to laugh that time? How does that actually work? Now, they're talking about Fukushima, and he said the reason he hadn't... we've covered Vetter, I don't know how many times over the years, but he's a terrible person, right? He's the same as Kathleen. All these people are the same as Kathleen Higley. And he's from the Mayo Clinic. That just should frighten the daylights of everybody on this planet. How did they all know to laugh at that time is the question.
Well, the reason I haven't had an opportunity to talk is because there are no problems in the medical field.
You see Kathleen Higley's face there? Ooh. She cracks up. She was like, that's probably what I would have said, for God's sakes. There it is right there. Scary. What's the point of universities if we're going to put mass murderers and serial killers in positions of authority? I wonder. Higley holds a doctorate in philosophy and health physics, and the Navy has misrepresented her as a medical expert. She wears many pins, right? And radiation exposure in communities meetings announcement titles, "The Doctor is In."
And then kind of in the middle, it says, insert radiation expert here. So I am the radiation expert that they're inserting into this particular talk.
And you can see the people that are there with her. Korsnick is there, right? Nuclear Energy Institute. Miles O'Brien. And TEPCO degenerate. We'll play a little clip of him come. And Dr. Dale Klein. It's just... He was from Harvard, if I remember. We covered him after Fukushima happened. When Harvard done a presentation on it, or Yale, or Stanford, or Oxford, I can't remember. No, it was Harvard. According to the Oregon State newsletter, Higley is the go-to expert on the impact of radiation. According to the Oregon State newsletter, the university is pumping out a mass murderer and a serial killer, serving as a consultant for the affected areas and offering guidance to governmental agencies in the aftermath of a hazardous event. Her job is to cut all the victims' throats and deny them any recognition.
I mean, I could line up foodstuffs, just naturally occurring foodstuffs, and I could bring a Geiger counter and I could get it to go off with certain kinds of food simply because of the enhanced levels of naturally occurring radioactivity in them. Actually,
you can't. You can't do that with a Geiger counter. The Geiger counter doesn't pick up sunshine either, by the way. That food either came out of Ukraine or came out of the Mayak region or came out of 3 Mile Island region or Fukushima region and is highly contaminated food. What a terrible person. Last year she was brought to the former shipyard at Hunters Point outside of San Francisco, which for decades was the site of the U.S. Navy Radiological Defense Laboratory. The U.S. Navy. You can imagine how many burn pits they would have had at that place. After the environmental contractors overseeing the cleanup of radioactive waste at the site was accused of falsifying data, Kathryn was called in to clarify the potential risk. My God. Let's listen to...
You'll find situations where members of the public have these meters and they're waving them around and they don't know what it means. And just because, as Dr. Boyce said, just because the needle went up all the way to the end of the scale, that doesn't really mean necessarily anything except the background or your background radiation is increasing.
So if my Geiger counter goes through the roof, I'm out and looking for radiation in a known radioactive area, my Geiger counter goes through the roof, you're supposed to run back the way you just came. The Geiger counter can reach huge numbers. If you do that, though, you spoil the Geiger counter. You got to send it back in to get it. I don't know if you can, but it becomes radioactive if you get too high of a number. And so he's in the Mayo Clinic, the cancer clinic. My goodness. And she's out. She's basically an assassin for the government. Her job is to murder the victims, get rid of the evidence, deny the loved ones any... Just a horrible, horrific, terrible betrayal. Harrison had noted that Higley has not conducted field survey work at Hunters Point, and yet the trusted advisor makes sweeping, racist, debunked claims applying bad gene therapy to explain pervasive cancer and death in the community.
Something too on the meter, just to mention, even though I spent all this time right next to the reactors, I received more radiation on my transcontinental flights from Tokyo to Washington than I did at the reactor site. So I tried to use that in terms of, yeah, the meters went off scale, but it's not that it was off scale, and I didn't stay there that long to even...
The guy to his left, Robert Gale, he does human transplants. And the lies that he tells, and once you understand these nuances and you listen to all the, we can't do it tonight, and you listen to all the lies that man tells, that's he must torture the people that are getting limb transplants. It defies that people like this are allowed to exist. It just defies that we're a human species. Applying bad gene therapy or theory to explain pervasive cancer and death in the community. Higley has not conducted field surveys. I work with people in the international community to try and develop tools, she says, to better understand radiation doses to non-human organisms, she says. For the past 2 decades, she has focused more on environmental rather than the human risk. I work with the international community. Ignore John there for a second. So this clip of Kathryn will give you some context of how many organizations and the significance of her lies can be. She's part of UNSCLEAR, UN, ERPA, all the radiological go-to for governments around the world. She's the one that the government is going to be talking to around the world. And her job is to pretend that it's like a banana or a potato chip or walking in sunshine. It's unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable. What she tells you and the people that does the same job as her is something to behold.
You know, there's another thing too, and about the levels, and the issue that the people have been evacuated, and now the issue is, after a year, is how to get them back.
How do we get them back? Less than a year after 4 meltdowns and 8 reactor pools melting down started, okay, so this one here is Kathryn talking about all the, or not all, but this group of people. This is really telling.
When I was trying to pull this talk together, not only will I sort of get a little philosophical about the impacts and the like and try to put things in context, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about who are these radiation experts that get trotted out in events like this, or that get to participate in various activities and analysis to make pronouncements about is something safe or not safe. And if you look, you'll see organizations that are often represented. The ICRP, International Commission on Radiological Protection, a premier organization. You'll see UNSCEAR and ERPA. So UNSCEAR is the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. ERPA, the International Radiation Protection Association. The IAEA and some of its folks, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Our own US NCRP. And then there are a number of other organizations. So there's PAHO, there's the Health Physics Society, there's World Health Organization. All of these will bring in, as necessary, experts to speak to you on issues related to radiation protection, radiation safety, and impacts. But if you go a little deeper and you start looking at these organizations, the ICRP, for example, very well known. It's been operating nearly 100 years, not quite. Main commission, 10 people. It's got 5 standing committees, so it's 100-ish folks. I lead one of the 5 committees. If you look at the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation that looked at the effects from Chernobyl, from Fukushima, from other areas, and that has about 30, roughly, countries that are represented in that group. If you start teasing through these pictures, you're going to see the same people on every one of those organizations. So the same people from ICRP are on UNSCEAR, they're in IRPA. If you look at the NCRP, again, the US organization that advises the country on radiation protection issues, it's 100 people, a lot of gray-haired 100 people. And most of them are part of UNSCEAR, are part of IRPA, are part of ICRP, participate in IAEA. So the result, or the real world, is that there's not that many folks that really do radiation safety, radionuclide transport, dose calculations, all of this in the world. It's a pretty small club, and we wear 20 hats. Today I put on 3 pins, and I could put on a whole bunch more, but Health Physics Society, ICRP, Certified Health Physicist, I've got NCRP on there, I've done IAEA, and so the point is, we're a small group, you should cherish us. So,
we're a small group, you should cherish us. So it's captured, everything is captured, right? And the only conversations allowed are the controlled opposition. Is Miles O'Brien the one-armed bandit? I mean, I can't play this whole video presentation. There's 2 parts to it. I've actually covered the entire thing. According to the attendees in February 28, 2022 meetings of the Hunters Point shipyard, speaking from our office in a galaxy far, far away, Higley minimized the impact of the radiation exposure at Hunter Point and attributed to Hunter Point's biomonitoring foundation's detections of chemicals and disease clusters in residents and workers to bad genes. From our research, Oregon State University scientist Dr. Kathleen Higley said so what is she teaching all the students at universities? By proxy, how to be monsters. Said she isn't too concerned debris from Fukushima tsunami will be radioactive when it reaches the west coast. And that's all we seem to run into is the demons. Just a quick model. This model is quick too, by the way. It's a 15-day model of radioactive fallout. So think about the tsunami debris in the Pacific Ocean over there. Is it going to be covered in radioactive fallout? Oh, that's right. The whole bloody planet was in 16 days. That's France's model. Not that anybody cares. Kathleen Higley is not a doctor of medicine. She's a doctor of murder. Paid by the Navy. She's a sniper, a killer. She's a mass murderer. Everywhere she goes, her job is to deny the victim's life. And spoon-fed, the Navy doesn't spoon-feed her talking points. She's 100% fluent. There's so many like her. There's another guy sitting there with her. There's another guy sitting there in the background. The Japanese guy. We'll get to it.
The used fuel pools up near the top of the buildings have been depleted of water and overheating. That's been the focus. That's been the footage of helicopters dropping water, I think.
There's actually a story coming up about that also. Okay, so he's going to talk about he's with Kathleen Higley at the same place. He's from TEPCO. Because might as well cover while we're here. So he's going to show you what Reactor 4 building looks like, fuel pool looks like. Now, the fuel pool is at the very top of the building. That's Reactor 4 over there. There is no top. That's not going to stop a good lawyer. Now, he's sitting there with Kathleen Higley. He's got the press club in front of him in Washington.
And Fukushima Daiichi stage, right after the accident, it was, of course, the emergency condition. But right now, gradually became the decommissioning stage, more stable decommissioning stage. And that's that, as I mentioned, the successful completion of the dismantle of the spent fuel from the Unit 4. It's about 1533 bundle from the Unit 4. And we carefully manipulate the machine and successfully remove those fuel to the ground located pool.
So all of those people on the stage with Kathleen, he's one of them. All of them, their job is to manipulate you. And so the building actually looks like that. There is no fuel pool. That's what makes the whole story crazy, is that they're willing to, and they went and got an education specifically to do that, so they can tell these stories. They're very highly educated. That gives them credibility. It's hard to argue with somebody with that kind of an education unless you use evidence and facts. When the building actually looks like this, but TEPCO, very carefully manipulated. They always speak in a very soft voice. So that's the official story, right? Now, Helen Caldicott, probably the world's most well-known nuclear activist, 14 books on anti-nuclear, documentaries, you name it. She's going to try to convince you also the building doesn't actually look like that. No, it looks like that. That's what she's going to do.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
But the building, as I put the pictures there for you, so the building actually looks like this. It can't look like that because it looks like this. And those pools would be about 100 feet above it, and another 20, 30 feet above that would be the roof of the building. So I put her in there, and right, but she's known worldwide. She's done the same thing in hundreds of interviews. It doesn't look like that, see? Now, Arnie Gunnarsson made the fuel assemblies, the assemblies for the fuel pools, the assemblies which you put the fuel rods in. And they usually hold like 100 fuel rods, 18 pounds each, 12 foot long. There's around 800 of them inside the reactors. So I put Arnie up where the fuel pools are, and that's the building he's talking about. And he wants you to believe that the building is a beautiful building. Like TEPCO is showing you. But it's just like that's how Kathleen is just, she's extremely good. She's way more advanced than Arnie.
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
And Kathleen likes pretending that it looks like that too. She's there with him as he's telling that story. They've done the same thing, by the way, for Reactor 3 in Japan. Its fuel pools are gone also. And that's the official picture of them pretending they're looking down on the fuel pools, which would be at the very way above that in Reactor 3. It actually doesn't exist. at Can We Live. I never got a chance to check it out. Regarded as a friend of the nuclear industry, that's right. Where does she fit into the nuclear industry? She's their golden goose. Everywhere she goes, she lays a golden egg for the nuclear industry. Regarded as a protector of the nuclear industry, Higley wrote in the Democratic Herald that based on her studies of uranium uptake in plants, radiation in 2011 Fukushima tsunami debris threatening the entire West Coast won't be unsafe. She must have been on drugs at that minute. In 2012, Higley countered the findings of Stanford University environmental engineer Mark Jacobson's, who I think we covered, by the way, who broke with the party line propaganda that the cancer death toll from Fukushima would be negligible and estimate up to 1,300 excess deaths worldwide. So how are you going to get 1,300 deaths worldwide? Oh yeah, radiation fallout? She called that finding uncertain. Given how much cancer already exists in the world, it would be difficult to prove anyone's cancer was from Fukushima. Unless you're in Japan, I suppose, where cancer increased by 865,000 in the first year, according to the Japan's Cancer Institute, than any other year. And there's 1,800 illnesses you get from radiation. That's just cancer. On Tuesday, March the 15th, 2022, Higley was joined by a contingent of Bayview Hunters Point residents, activists, community leaders. And they didn't... leaders during her monthly community outreach virtual meeting hosted by the Navy that murders and kills people for a living. They all eat the same meals, dress the same suits, shit in the same toilet. They're all individuals, I tell you. While admitting she is paid by the Navy to attend meetings as an independent consultant, which she can't be independent if someone's paying you to be her, Higley doubled down on her dismissal of the cancer clusters. They had cancer clusters in Cumbria, right alongside of Sellafield, used to be known as Windscale in the United Kingdom, where they're reprocessing fuel rods from all over the world, including from Japan. And they blamed it on the flu, right, in academic studies. Higley doubled down on her dismissal of the cancer clusters mapped at the shipyard entry, stating 1/3 of the people will be diagnosed with cancer anyway. It's because of the radioactive fallout. This is a 20-day model of Fukushima radioactive fallout. There's more than one in every three, but there's 1,800 illness this will get you too. It's not. You should be looking for clusters of heart problems and cluster of liver problems and cluster of lung problems and clusters of pituitary damage and thyroid and adrenaline. You should be looking for clusters of Alzheimer's and dementia and autism. Definitely should be looking for clusters of diabetes and Down syndrome, because it's been going on for decades. The misinformation amounts to Higley fake news. Higley should be arrested, prosecuted, and locked up for the rest of her natural life. She's insane to do the things she's doing. That's the definition of insane when you take that kind of job. You're clearly unstable individual. The clustering of brain and central nervous system tumors around the main gate. Again, we see all these different illnesses. And cancer, because most people, they think just cancer, right? If you go looking at all the studies, probably 80% of them will only talk about cancer. Well, I don't see a big spike in cancer, so it's probably okay. That's simply not how radiation works. 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies, that you got to be accounting for. You can't just look for cancer. and its radiation-contaminated industrial landfill is an abnormality. The detection of 3 residents with multiple brain tumors. Wow. Within blocks of the shipyard, main gate, and shoreline is an abnormality. Inhaling just one radioactive hot particle can cause a cancer. And that's one of the best spots you can find it is down there with the military stuff. Detection of a string of breast cancer. And we've seen studies that 6 times more breast cancer within 15 miles of a nuclear power plant anywhere on the planet. Detection of a string of breast cancers encircling the shipyard's 6-block perimeter like a red pearl necklace, which Higley was wearing in those videos, by the way. Detection of a string of breast cancers. All of these are 100% giveaways. Detection of a cluster within a cluster of a brain, thyroid, lung, and even dog cancers in Building 606, occupied by the San Francisco Police Department on the shipyard's southern shoreline is an abnormality. Oh, that's 100%. Because most police are fairly transient or shipped somewhere else after 4 years. Right? It's hard. And the industry counts on that, by the way. The screening of a US or UCSF worker that detected uranium concentrations 17 times higher than acceptable for the normal population, an abnormality. Definitely done your homework so far. Bad gene theory suggests the BVHP community is comprised of long-term residents who are bad seeds, genetically predetermined to be at a higher risk of cancers and diseases, which is one of their favorite fables in this industry we noticed over the years. The strategic application of bad seed theory, which is a terrible garbage can diagnosis, is evident in flippant comments made publicly by the Navy's community technical experts, blaming the clustering of brain, breast, and thyroid cancer epicenter around the main gate of the radiation laboratory at Hunters Point Navy shipyards as bad genes. It's bad luck that the Navy set up shop in your communities. Because there's a Navy shipyard there, that means there's a child sex brothel not very far away of children that were kidnapped within 300 or 400 miles of that place. Because they always do that, right? They're incredible perverts. Higley's strategic use of bad gene theory to explain away cancer clusters at the shipyard front door is an example of bad seed theory deliberately applied. She's a bad seed, a bad gene. She should be arrested. That person. If you can just go ahead and arrest her, or take all of her presentations and lectures and diagnose it and go through it, and you'll find she's a genocidal maniac. She's just a mass murderer. She revels in it is the scary part. Bad gene theory, completely disconnected from what a human experience is supposed to be. Who would you rather have living alongside you? Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, or Kathleen Higley? Definitely not Kathryn Higley, man. You don't want to be living in her neighborhood. You don't want to piss her off. She'll poison you in a heartbeat. Won't even blink an eye, that one. Bad. Gene theory proposes damaging generational effects of chronic toxic exposures on the genes of Bayview Hunters Point residents has spawned a population of bad seeds, more vulnerable to cancer induced by radiation and cancer-causing chemicals at the shipyard. It's true. Right, generations of people being raised here would have their immune systems compromised and be more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally benign and innocuous, harmless. For those who agree, it's time for the United States Navy to put a muzzle on the junkyard dog guarding the Hunter Point shipyard out of a doghouse in Oregon. That's being pretty polite. Email your thoughts to Rebecca Johnson, the president of the University of Oregon. Can you get any idea what kind of degenerate Rebecca Johnson is? You really think she's some kind of a... Like, if you checked her DNA, it's going to say non-human. They don't get the job because they're human. And I mean that by they're missing those chromosomes. They're zero emotion people. You can't do what they're doing unless you're zero, unless you like apathy. They set up shop in vulnerable communities where a small group of monsters, and we'll murder as many as we can. It's an absurdness that she's allowed to be in a university with an office. It's absurd that she doesn't lose her degrees immediately. It's absurd that there's not agencies out there that will arrest her for what she does. She is a perpetual murderer. There's not many perpetual things on the planet. She's a perpetual murderer. She teaches people to murder and lie. This is what you'll see touring the Fukushima exclusion zone. That's Chernobyl, stupid. And an absurdly low number on a Geiger counter. The Fukushima exclusion zone is the only able to be toured through one tour company. It's a government company, and this is what you'll see along the way. That's not what you're going to see along the way, moron. There's something fascinating about nuclear events. TEPCO got a job for you if you want. Perhaps spiritual feeling is invoked. Really? Spiritual. Spiritual. Some people's kids, well, like he's like Kathleen Higley, where there's this complete disconnect of reality. Their parents were scumbags in the industry. Their parents were scumbags. Their great parents were scumbags, and by golly, they're going to be scumbags too. I don't know how these people can exist, to tell you the truth. Well, I know, because we go through it all the time, right? Hang on. Spiritual. Yeah, there's something spiritual, all right. Your immune system gets compromised. You liquidate your assets trying to stay alive. And the nuclear industry finishes you off with radiation. The tiny island nation of Japan, over 154,000 people were evacuated. It was actually almost 1 million, 500,000 rather. Sunflowers are used to assist in cleaning up after a nuclear disaster. Actually, we got a lot of plants growing them. They're for sale, make oil and everything else. And jam and stuff like that. And it's just to get rid of the radiation that's falling out of the nuclear plant, right? Because they're always hemorrhaging radiation, and then that poisons you, and the pharmaceutical industries and the insurance companies make a killing. Sunflowers are used to assist in cleaning it up, but that plant is actually running. Which means it's a farm for food. For a decade, Fukushima was a radioactive exclusion zone. It will be for at least a couple of thousand years, which means no one was permitted to live in and around the site of the power plant. As of 2021, the Japanese government determined that it's safe to resettle in certain parts of Okuma, which is less than 2.5 kilometers away from multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns. They left over 90 Alzheimer's victims in a hospital. And I think it was 50 of them perished or something. Okuma. Despite years of extensive nuclear waste cleanup, there are still areas that test higher in radiation than others. Well, first off, still melting down. Second off, you had 4 major events and then 8 fuel pools that detonated. Despite years of cleanup, it was just the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. Immigrants don't speak the language. Luke Radinsky from We Are Change. Follow me on Snapchat before my Fukushima exclusion zone snaps are deleted. Now remember, at that same time, he was hanging out with Ryan Dawson and James Colbert, who I was calling out in 2005 when I wasn't on the ocean, because I was out on the ocean most of 2015, rather, when that picture was posted. I was actually on the ocean at that time, up by Alaska, doing research expeditions. And so I never did call out Luke for hanging out with James Colbert and Ryan Dawson, notorious pumps for any industry, really, but the nuclear industry. They were making fun of everybody that was concerned about Fukushima, trying to ridicule him. It was really something. I've learned not to trust any of them until I look into their comments about this stuff. Then you find out if they're real or not. And unfortunately, we don't got no one to turn to. Fukushima Prefecture, as we see every night, certainly. In summary, a nuclear power plant relies on nuclear fission. Thermal heat is generated by the splitting of uranium-125, 235 atoms. Piano, Fukushima, Japan, exclusion zone. So they had all these people that had went down there and tweeted it out, or just took a picture and tweeted it out. Man sneaks into Fukushima exclusion zone. Captured never seen before pictures. In total, there were 3 nuclear meltdowns. There was 4 plus 8 fuel pools that had melted down or detonated. There's 2 at the top of each building that are stuffed with decades of reactor cores because they don't have a repository anywhere. And which means that the bore rate of water in the fuel pools can't contain the atoms. The atoms are still being split. That's why it's underwater. The water sucks it up and evaporates it 24/7 up the big, tall, skinny stacks. This is why they're surrounded by farms. 3 hydrogen explosions. There was 4, but some of these places were multiple detonations, like Reactor 4, Reactor 1, Reactor 2. Reactor 3 was a firecracker, just left a stump there. And radioactive contamination in 3 reactors. What do you mean in 3 reactors? The reactors actually don't even exist anymore. That's Reactor 4, for instance. It actually don't even exist. It's just a stump. The way they framed this is not an accident. When you see them framing it like that, they're very specific, trying to draw you a picture. And the picture is that building is still intact or something. Well, that's propaganda. Because you got to be pretty clever to write this stuff in the first place. See? Following the earthquake, tsunami, nuclear catastrophe, the government of Japan evacuated 154. It was actually 500,000 left. Whether the government evacuated them or not, 480-something thousand ran. To today, radioactive water is still flowing to the Pacific Ocean, causing untold damage, mutation to sea life, as well as birds and animals that form part of the marine. And the only legal way to visit the exclusion zone in Fukushima is through Real Fukushima. Real Fukushima is a tour company run by the local Fukushima prefectural government. The world's most famous for its cherry blossoms, with no protection whatsoever, like they're invisible because they listen to the nuclear industry, or people like Kathleen Higley. Fun fact, so long as one does not stay for longer than a few hours. No, you breathe it in, it's permanent. It sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. It pulses energy every second for the rest of your life. It is relatively safe to visit the Fukushima exclusion zone. Again, this is simply not true. Like a really good way to understand this is, where did 15 countries or 55 countries banned food from? Not just Fukushima, but 14 prefectures, which meant 14 prefectures were incredibly contaminated. Period. So Fukushima is going to be brutal because it's ground zero, see? That's why you can't go back, by the way. Real Fukushima is also launching a new nuclear power plant tour next month. From April the 16th, I think it is 2022, next month on the 16th, for the first time ever, which that's simply not true. They bring school kids in on buses, and many times over the years we've caught them doing it. The general public will be able to access the inside of the power plant. The inside of the power plant. I can't wait to see what that means. You know what, that's going to be interesting. I wouldn't go near it. You couldn't drag me there. But a hair in my head, I still wouldn't go. After years of cleanups, the radiation inside the plant is equivalent to a couple of dental x-rays. Oh, it's milder than outer space radiation that people are exposed to from flying. I checked, it didn't say the banana word. We beat that out of them about 7, 8, 9 years ago or something. And just attacked everybody who said the word banana. So it was pretty busy for a couple of years. After years of cleanup, the radiation inside the plant is equivalent. There's spots there now they still don't have control of. They still don't have access to. You can't go to Medusa 1, Medusa 2, Medusa 3, Medusa 4, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4, and get a selfie. You're not coming back. And your camera's not going to work there anyway. And it's even milder than outer space radiation that people are exposed to from flying. Well, outer space radiation is different than flying radiation. Flying radiation is completely different than anthropogenic man-made radiation. We call this man-made because it's man-made. The solar system doesn't produce these elements. These are human-made. And so, by proxy, none of the species on the planet have a defense against it. After years of cleanup, the radiation, incredible lies. Most of the radiation exposure comes from unit 1 to 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, it's not going to come from tanks because they're empty. And tanks were built to trick you into thinking they're not killing the planet and the ocean. No one's allowed in those reactors. That's reassuring. And the radiation exposure comes from driving nearby in a bus. Well, we got pictures of them claiming, as I showed you earlier, claiming they're in reactor 3 and reactor 4. So that's a very interesting statement, see? If the journalists can do it, how come you guys can't? The massive power plant campus is almost 90% clean. Power plant campus. Do you call for a Chernobyl a campus too? 90% clean. You'll never get it clean. It's still melting down. The steam that's coming out of the ground is lethal doses. You can't fix that. You can't pave over these cracks in the ground because you can't get near them for starters. And the water coming in contact with the fuel detonates. The size of a small city that was covered in fuel rods that then atomized in aerosol. Tokyo Electric Power Company, not all of it, of course, but Tokyo Electric Power Company said it had begun an investigation of the inside the containment vessel of Unit 1. Again, we're hearing this talk where they're setting the stage for Unit 1. Fable, like they've done with Reactor 4 and Reactor 3. They're really something, eh? The nuclear industry, it's a terrible industry, terrible creatures. I wish they had humans working there. That should be the next poll. Should the nuclear industry hire humans? I think we already had that poll, didn't we? Speaking of polls, our poll tonight is getting spammed again. Look at that, boy. Should nuclear students have to work at the Fukushima nuclear meltdown before they can graduate? And 83% says, yeah, that makes sense. Now, just the last 3 shows, we've seen them spam the opposite of rational in these polls. There's only been 3 days in a row. This is the 3rd day that they've done that to us. Because there's always a resounding common sense. Like, you know, the idea of the poll is to reinforcing everybody that there's some real issues in this industry. It's completely sadistic, every facet of it. So every poll typically is on a different facet. Last night's poll was a bit of a lark compared to the one before, right? Because the one before was thousands of nuclear degenerate scumbags. Because the nuclear industry survived without thousands of degenerate nuclear scumbags, which was a mistake. It should have been, and I corrected it last night, can the nuclear industry survive without hundreds of thousands of degenerate scumbags? And then the poll tonight, we notice, is being skewed. The nuclear industry generally does not hang out on my site, so it's just somebody with a bunch of ghost accounts, obviously. A public relation firm, no doubt. Tokyo Electric Power Company said it begun an investigation of the inside of a liquefied reactor. It was supposed to start last month, but was suspended. The industries, Japan's government to boost monitoring spots ahead of the 2023 treated water release. Treated. There's a well-disciplined media we notice on this planet. The tanks, if you fill up the tank at 2.2 sieverts an hour, because that's what we're talking about, you're pouring water over a melted reactor. If you tried filtering it, you can never get near the filter again. It's a lethal dose after 15 minutes. But after 1 day, you can't get near the building. You can never get back inside the building to change your filter. No electronics can survive in this environment. The hoses that are going there are lethal doses by the gallon, which means the hose is emitting gamma shines, X-rays, and neutrons. The tanks are not thick enough to shield you from the volumes that are actually talking about. You're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter. So a gallon, if it was 20 feet away from me when I started tonight, I'd already be dead. If you take 5 gallons of this stuff that's actually, you pouring water over these melted reactor buildings, these are huge numbers we're talking about, buildings. That water is so toxic. 5 gallons of it at a subway. Everybody who walks past it for 1,000 years will die that day. just 5 gallons. So the tanks, you can't build another tank there if you fill up the tank, because the tank needs to be 6 to 8 feet thick, because you have 1.4 million sieverts. 10 sieverts is lethal to everybody, all humans. See, 20 or 100 sieverts is lethal dose just running, jogging past it. So 1.4 million sieverts, you can't build a tank on the other side of the site, let alone alongside of it. It's strictly to convince you they didn't kill the Pacific. And if you go to my webpage, thenuclearproctologist.org, you'll see the before and after pictures of the west coast of British Columbia to Alaska from research expeditions for 6 years. It was extinction. It's an extinction event. The industry is just, every facet of it is just actually gross. Japanese government decided to boost marine monitoring spots. The Japanese government anticipated release of the words treated water. These are, people are insane. From the damaged Fukushima, calling it treated water. You can't treat the water. But that's the law, and if you say it enough, a big percentage of people are going to believe it. In fact, almost everybody. At the Fukushima Daiichi plant, water is used to cool the molten nuclear corium fuel. The biggest byproduct is going to be corium isotopes, by the way, of the radiated fuel rods. Mixes with rain and groundwater and typhoons and snowstorms and flows into the damaged reactor buildings. The water is treated to remove most of the radioactive materials, but still contains tritium. Now, my goodness, right? Once again, you can't do it because you're talking about lethal doses by the gallon to any human on the planet. The treated water, that's even with like a 4-foot lead suit on. The treated water will be discharged into the ocean after being diluted below government safety standards starting next year. Again, they had 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,200 tanks in 2014. Hang on. $900 tanks in 2017. 1,000 tanks in 2019. 1,000 tanks in 2021. And 1,000 tanks in 2022. It's all good. It's the way it rolls, isn't it? There we go. That's 2021 right there, 1,000 tanks. Okay, so 20 Mari Yamaguchi. August 20th, 2013, 1,000 tanks. March the 10th, 2014, Mari Yamaguchi. Associated Press, 1,200 tanks. 2017, 900 tanks. Try walking with both of your feet flat on the ground. See how that works. Japan will have to dump radioactive water into the Pacific 2019. This line here, 1,000 tanks. 2021, last year, you guessed it, 1,000 tanks. 1,000 tanks 2013, 1,000 tanks in 2022. How many tanks do they fill a year? The government decided to increase its tritium monitoring locations to 42, by 42 to 54 within 300 meters to 50 kilometers of the release spot. Also include fish in its monitoring. The government plans to make measurements 4 times per year. There's been lingering concern, mainly among local communities, based on adverse rumors. The Environment Minister said he pledged the effort to dispel the unfounded rumors. Big bucks for Twitter and Google and Facebook, saying that relevant organizations will work together to offer a sense of security to those who are worried. Remember that guy who said he went to a nuclear plant when he was 10 years old and set him on the path of being a permanent scumbag and accepted as a scumbag by the nuclear industry? Quake-hit Tohoku train, a high-speed train, to resume service, in more sections. Not full service, half speed or something. Between Tokyo and Fukushima on Saturday. 50 to 60% of the trains are back in service for the time being, to be operated at a maximum speed of 160 kilometers, roughly half the usual speed. So they usually fly at 320 kilometers in a major seismic earthquake area. That's pretty clever. 16 cars of 17 bullet train cars went off the track on March the 16th. They covered up that earthquake and the damage. There's radioactive plumes here right now. Social acceptance of geothermal energy in Japan. Geothermal, because the Japanese actually own the hot springs. Researchers from Tohoku University modeled the process by which public opinions evolve regarding the development of geothermal power plants. So what you got to do is you got to have wind and solar. And if you put your wind on the top of mountains where the wind blows all the time, never mind, that makes too much sense. And so wind and solar, you back that up by geothermal and tidal energy. And because you can predict 3,000 years down the road to the second tidal energy. And tidal energy and geothermal are 24-hour energies. But you back that up with compressed air storage, dig big tunnels and fill that up with compressed air, and pumped hydro, where you can have recirculatory pumped hydro. So guaranteed 4 different ways to have peak energy. It's like overkill, right? Don't matter what breaks down, you got tons of energy kicking around. Don't matter how big the population gets, you got tons of energy to accommodate it. Don't matter how big the industry is, you got tons of energy to accommodate it. And because of pumped hydro, compressed air storage, and geothermal, and tidal energy, and last year was 291 gigawatts of renewables came online in 12 months, which is equal to, because most nuclear power plants are not a gigawatt, right? It's equal to around 333 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online last year, according to the International Energy Association, if you can believe them. Japan has abundant geothermal potential. Yeah. Well, their tidal energy would be wicked good down there. Further development of geothermal energy initiatives have been thwarted by the country's reliance on nuclear power. And so the grid is set up to only accept more nuclear power. Right? They engineered it that way over the last 4 decades in order to make sure solar and wind doesn't start pushing them out. You can replace everything. They're going to replace everything on the planet by 2025 with renewables. There's going to be 4,800 gigawatts of new energy between now and 2024, 2025. That's the equivalent of all the nuclear power plants currently on the planet, which is around 300 gigawatts. That's more power than all of the nuclear, all the fossil fuel plants on the planet combined. Will be new energy coming online from renewables in the next 3 to 4 years. The forecast of the International Energy Agency. A volunteer-led organization assisting economic recovery efforts planned a geothermal plant for less than $1 million. Will make about $1 million annually. But they ran into the good old boys club. Hot spring owners expressed more negative opinions on geothermal development. IAF's Bambi bucket helped to contain a blaze at an Indian tiger reserve. And so I was trying to figure what the hell that showed up in the search engine for. And then I seen it. The Bambi bucket was also used in Japan to douse the nuclear reactors in the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster. This is absolutely, well, he tried, he gave it up right away. Because the buildings were already destroyed. See, this was just show and tell. And over 600 helicopter pilots died in Chernobyl. So there was a bit of show and tell for the nuclear industry to get a few camera pictures, and then he gave it up right away. But to claim that it was effective and it doused the nuclear reactors, and in the context they're using right there, that's propaganda on purpose, see? Saskatchewan planned, and it's disgusting. Whoever done it is disgusting, it's despicable, it's revolting to tell a lie like that. Saskatchewan plans to build, now Saskatchewan is the uranium capital for many years here in Canada. They'll kill everybody to get their paychecks every week. Saskatchewan planned to build small nuclear reactors, draws a mixed reaction. I came out and pummeled them last night, right? Because Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, and New Brunswick all came out and bend the knee and kiss the ring of the nuclear industry. Saskatchewan plans to build, like, good for them, right? But it's not going to happen because Renewables already demonstrated that nuclear is it's just simply not going to exist much longer. It can't compete. But not only that, they don't have a functional reactor anywhere on the planet. You know, oh, we can build it in factories and ship it on the road. It's cheap. It's just propaganda to sell it. And it's a cycle where this pops up and is in the news for a couple of weeks and then they quiet down again. They got their funding and they go away. It's 100%. Environmentalists say nuclear power risk outweigh the benefits. Nuclear environment. So, like, if you criticize nuclear, you're an environmentalist. Putting that kind of a label on such an important topic is the nuclear industry, right? Always got to keep that label attached to her. Oh, you're an environmentalist. So you run into the weirdos, and that's their version of the conversation. The report said the nuclear reactors are safe and reliable, and a source of zero-emission energy. Of course, the report is written by the industry itself. You don't exist, not even really on paper, right? This is probably what it's going to look like. It's real disturbing that they're allowed to do stuff like that. Issam Hussain, the Dean of Engineering at the University of Regina. I'll gut everybody on the planet for my beloved nuclear industry. Insane said that if the government wants to move away from coal-fired energy to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, well, the biggest emissions of greenhouse gases is radiation. Radiation is the problem. So this is another Fukushima plume. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. It's been doing this. It doesn't go away, right? All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. It never goes away. It's like a snowstorm that never melts. And every day there's more snow. That's what nuclear power plants are doing. Every day there's more radiation, but it never melts. It never goes away. It's just more and more and more until the parts per million destroy everything. That's what climate change is. The choice we have now is live with climate change and wipe out humanity and all its creatures with ourselves, or take something that is known in a way. Nuclear power has been with us since the 50s. I mean, it's disgusting to have people in positions of authority, and that's their job, is to come out and lie and manipulate and deceive and coerce the population. And if they all work together synergistically, they can defeat humanity and the 8 million species futures, which is what we see happening now, right? Small modular reactors bring jobs. Really? And no other power source brings jobs, does it? The weakest argument in history. Oh, it brings jobs. Really? There's nothing out there that don't bring jobs. And you don't want anything. Small modular reactors are going to run on mixed oxide fuel. This is where they're going to get their oomph from, right? Or really highly enriched fuel. And then, like, typical power plant is around 5% enriched. These people want to be 15 and 20 or more. So they got more energy, more danger, more toxic. You can't touch this stuff for hundreds of years. They're not thinking long term at all, right? It's strictly everything works on huge funding, so huge opportunities to skim from the top. The reactors have an estimated price tag of $5 billion each. You can actually build a huge reactor for $10 billion. That's probably not true anymore, is it? They need to be able to steal at least $10 billion, I should say. Small modular reactor development in Canada depends on money from Ottawa, money from the taxpayers. Reactors have an estimated price tag of $5 billion each. A conventional nuclear reactor generates 1,000 megawatts. Small modular reactors are movable and manufactured in factories and transported by trucks and trains and ships and pigeons. That's what I mean. These are maniacs, eh? Toad-shaped meter. They're not movable. They're not going to be manufactured in factories. They're not going to be transported by trucks and trains or ships. Because Renewables have already demonstrated that they're going to be the way of the dodo bird. So I'm shocked that these politicians don't have more business sense. Which is a good point, actually, isn't it? And Coxworth, a nuclear chemist, a member of the Saskatchewan Environmental Society, agreed with Geary that the small modular reactors are still in the development stage. I'm glad you got it verified by somebody nobody knows. What these provinces are asking governments to do is invest in very risky money in a technology that has a lot of environmental problems. That's being pretty polite. Associated with it, and which cannot even hope to put a dent on the greenhouse gas emissions. Well, nuclear is what's causing the climate change. It kills all the bacteria in the forest. On top of that, the forests don't break down. The forest fires are way more intense because the litter didn't break down. Because you killed the bacteria and all the other insects that would have broke it down. Last year, we couldn't even find a spider on a research expedition out in the forest. Unbelievable. Well, it won't make it for at least a decade because you got to build it, you got to get the kinks out of it, you got to build another one. That's 20, 25, 30 years. And the way the nuclear industry works is probably 40 or 50 years. They do everything, then they go back and sleep for a week, and they come back and then they scratch their head, go back to sleep for a week. Other options that are cheaper and safer are pretty well ready to roll, baby. Which is a good point. She said that if people want to back green power supplies, governments should invest in storage, which we talked about earlier, right? So, like compressed air storage is brilliant because you don't need an ocean or water, or river, or lakes, or streams. All you're going to do is like a big compressor. You're just going to dig mine shafts. Technology now, we can dig mine shaft 1,000 miles long without even breaking a tooth in these things. So that's what you need. You need wind and solar backed up by storage, like compressed air and pumped hydro, and then backed up by continuous energy for guaranteed redundancy with geothermal and tidal energy. That combination is, it's overkill, but there's nothing you can't handle for, you always get tons of energy no matter what goes wrong. Well, there's always things that go wrong. There's something right there. You can't count on Kathleen Higley's coming in and destroying everything and people like her, this one here. From mechanical engineering to nuclear safety, career focused on protecting people and the environment. Because they got to make these people feel good about themselves, right? They really do. Because they're pretty bored, right? They kill all the puny species and humans. Then they got to pretend that they have some redeeming qualities. Protecting people from the environment is not something she's going to be doing, I can assure you. Bradford left the consulting firm 2000 to join the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That's signing a pact with the devil. Also known as the NRC. Her father was working in information technologies at the Department of Defense. Talk about embedded. This inspired me to join the government. Join the cult, the death cult known as the government. She spent 21 years, cushy job with the U.S. NRC as an environmental engineer. With the government. You had lots of, Kathleen Higley probably saved her ass lots of times, and being promoted several times. Finally to the position of Director of Division of New and Renewable Licenses. That's a pretty short name from the government. Normally they're like 3 times the length of that. Where with the IAEA, including a small modular reactor regulators form of which she chaired for a period. There's a lot going on with the small modular reactor community, I tell you what. Over the years, like the stuff we covered, I wouldn't want to guess the number of people, but several million people are milking this in governments worldwide. They're from the universities and institutions and think tanks and the industry. In September last year, she joined the International Atomic Energy Agency to head up the United Nations Agency Division of Nuclear Installation Safety. Now, they don't have any authority, period. They're just a organization, military-industrial complex is who they are. But legally, they have no authority, but because they're the military-industrial complex of 195 countries, United Nations, like the United Nations have all these subsidiaries, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, IAEA, UNSCLEAR, they all control opposition, right? These are savages. The nuclear industry is very well insulated. It'll be happy to exterminate every species on the planet as long as they can get their paychecks on Friday afternoon. Carbon-free power sources. This is absurdness. You can't call anything from nuclear carbon-free. Nothing. It's absurd. And this is since, it's been going on a while, but since the Paris Accord in 2015, we've seen that narrative at a sickening pace in almost every single story. Very rare not to have a story with that once. Typically, it's constant to see it 10 or 15 times in a story. Government advisor calls on Germany to keep nuclear power plants running. Germany's just shut down 3 nuclear reactors a couple of months ago, January the 1st. It was all 3 reactors were already shut down, I guess. And the other 3 will be shut down the end of this year in Germany. And so now they want to, and we knew this was coming, we talked about this before many times, is the nuclear industry now will try to get people in positions of authority over the last couple of years to stop that or reverse it. So they weren't able to stop it, so now they're going to go to and try to reverse it, because if they can reverse that, they stop the other 3 from shutting down at the end of the year. That's how the nuclear industry works. And they control the media. They captured all the media, all the universities worldwide, and all the key positions in government agencies. So unless the leader themselves of the country at the time has the influence to stop it, they'll get their way. And in this case, now they're going, because Angela Merkel's gone, they're going to try to reverse it with everything. And they have enormous amount of assets available to help them accomplish it. And that'll drive up the price of uranium stocks too, right? Raw uranium stocks. Volker Wieland. Germany 3 remaining nuclear power plants are scheduled to be shut down by the end of the year. I'm going to cover all that anyway. Ohio passes a bill aimed at nuclear power development. The doors are open. Come on, Ohio wants you now. The nuclear industry captured that place. The Ohio House wants to move forward with nuclear energy development while criminal proceedings continue for bribery scandals that involved nuclear plants and the former Speaker of the House. Yeah, billions of dollars got stolen. The big companies got caught with their weenies out, and now they got to kick back to cover it up. That's how it's normal business in the nuclear industry. It's unusual for them to get caught out though like that. The House Speaker, he didn't kick back to somebody. Be afraid of nuclear war, not climate change. Wall Street Journal. Be afraid of nuclear war. Well, nuclear war is not going to create plumes like Fukushima did. There's Fukushima. I shouldn't say that, I suppose. See, a nuclear bomb is over in a millionth of a second. These things are hemorrhaging 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That model is only 16 days. That your pipe and smoke it. And radioactive fallout is climate change. There's a big impetus on this nuclear war now. You see some of the other stories coming up later. A lot of stories I haven't got listed below. We ran out of space from alphabet. Be afraid of nuclear war, not climate change. Russia's war in Ukraine shows that global warming has distracted us from more important threats. It says solar panels on the rooftop. On the eve of war, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry fretted about the massive emission consequences of Russia's invasion. Really? John Kerry did. When America invaded Afghanistan, they fired 5.5 million rounds a month, every month for 9 years to get 10,000 Taliban. They knocked down every building, got rid of the pensions and the patents of everybody in the country. Then they went over to Iraq and done the same thing. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. To get the remains of 10,000 Taliban, which is why Syria was flattened, and they were some of the remains of the 10,000 Taliban that turned into 10,000 ISIL, and then some of them split it, went to Africa, become 10,000 Boko Haram, and Taliban came from the Mujahideen, which Russia was in Afghanistan, and flattened that for 10 years. Because those two places are full of natural resources and minerals that the military-industrial complex desperately wants. The global elite has an unhealthy obsession with climate change. Well, climate change is big money. It is real money. They gouge. It's another way of causing inflation, see? Everything is your fault. And so, everything is your fault. So the The industry is not authentic. It doesn't come up with its own ideas. It jacks it from players, right? Show you what I mean, I guess. Ooh, let me see. Am I lucky enough? Yeah, there it is. An interview with the father of global warming. So United Nations jacked that. So global warming. Oh, Miles Allen is the father of net zero. And who's the father of carbon footprint, Dan? It was interesting you would ask that. Which was BP Oil, a brief and frustrating history of the carbon footprint. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large public relation campaign in your local medias worldwide at the fossil fuel company BP in 2005. How do we get your fossil footprint down? That's pretty easy. We get it down and then the distractions, right? So who's the father of climate change? Is James Hansen from NASA. Best known for his research in climatology in 1988 congressional testimony on climate change raised broad awareness of global warming. He said NASA, not the government, but NASA was 99% confident the warning was caused by accumulation of greenhouse gases. So when you hear about greenhouse gases, where did that come from? Well, it came from James Hansen and NASA. Right? Just like Miles gave us net zero and climate change or global warming and carbon footprint was by BP Oil. James Hansen testimony was pivotal, turning point in history of global climate change and marked the official beginning of the global climate change policy debate. And they're savage in a sense, right? MIT is one of the worst ones. UC Berkeley has 90 years of promoting nuclear at that university, the School of Mass Destruction. So the United Kingdom takes it to a whole different level. We might as well have a few laughs.
Right, kids, just before you go, there's a brilliant...
Now, this is advertisement on television in the United Kingdom. But you better do your part.
idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually. Now, this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic! And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now, everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
Except Philip and Tracy. On TV. Teaching the children, you better do something, or you're disposable. You might also remember Barcode, everybody at Birth Lady for climate change. And climate change skeptics could be treated, says the professor. Oh, and the plague himself, David Attenborough. He's a lay down the planet. Militant environmentalist calls for execution of anybody. How about burning their houses down? Let's burn their houses down. They don't go along with us. Australian professor says global warming deniers should be sentenced to death. It never stops with this lot. And at the head of the beast is another one of these creatures, is United Nations. Oh, to be a monster. The world currently shells out more than $500 billion each year in private and public funds on climate policies. More than $500 billion. $500 billion. That's absurd. The UN estimates the average person in 2100 will be 450% as rich as today. If climate change continues unabated, the average person will be only 434% as rich. Going to lose 16% on inflation. $5 trillion spent over the past decade on climate policies. $5 trillion. So there's only a bunch of major companies that have been sucking up most of that. See? UN gets its chunk of the pie. And that the United Nations admitted in 2019 there is no real change in the global emission pathway in the last decade, despite global Paris Agreement, which was 2015. And so France's legacy in all of this is frightening. Again, you see him, right? The wind and solar gets kicked to the curb. And the only way to have it is got to be backed up with gas because the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And of course, if you use compressed air for storage and pumped hydro, instead of trying to develop stupid batteries, which could be used in some scenarios, but not for big cities, why not just use compressed air storage, right? It's stupid how easy it is to do it. On top of that, well-meaning politicians across the world have been proposing policies to reach net zero emission. Net zero emission was Miles Allen, right? All of that was jacked by United Nations and turned into an agenda through the universities and the medias to attack you. You're the problem. Right? The idea is to make you feel worthless and by proxy then helpless, and then their saviors, Spider-Man and the Hulk, will come in and rescue everybody. Policies will cost $9.2 trillion every year until net zero is supposed to be achieved in 2050. $9.2 trillion a year. So remember United Nations COP26 last year. We done 13 shows on it because it lasts 13 days. Starts on Halloween and ends 13 days later. A bunch of ghouls. It's appropriate, but ghoulish. Achieving net zero will cost every American family almost $20,000 a year, according to the study. That's a significant gouging on everybody, isn't it? Every citizen. So if you've got a family of 10, it's $100,000, $200,000 a year they got to shell out to the overlords, to the crazies, to the nuclear industry bootlickers. Mr. Lomborg is the president of Copenhagen Consensus and a visiting fellow at the Stanford University's Hoover Institute, who we've haven't really found anybody good from before. His latest book is False Alarm: How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillion, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. The solution is to kill nuclear immediately. Raphael Grossi is now officially, allegedly, in Ukraine. He tells Ukraine nuclear workers, "We're here to support you." International Atomic Energy Agency, because the nuclear industry is getting just a massive black eye over this. So he's down there in desperation, I see. So that's proof he's there, apparently. He put it up on his Twitter. Thank God for Twitter. Raphael, who visits the plant on the second day of his mission to Ukraine. Waltzed right in, slided right through a war zone, and got together and had a barbecue with all the... Everybody's like, war? What war? In a post on the Idiot Machine as Twitter, I don't know what the hell that is. Is that a camera, I wonder, or something? The cameras? What the hell are they? It doesn't tell you in the story. If it comes from the World Nuclear News, they're a lobbying group. They're nuclear lobbyists. Like, they're literally the worst people on the earth, after Kathleen Higley, of course. Here was a good one. EU lawmakers move to reject green gas and nuclear investment rules. Time of this yesterday, I think it was, or the day before. That's quite the statement. This is from the Scumbag National Post here in Canada, on top of that. It's originally from Reuters. I didn't see that coming. Really? Have they come around? Finally got their senses? There's got to be something going on. At least two groups, European Union lawmakers, have confirmed they'll reject the EU proposal to label gas and nuclear energy as sustainable investments. Last month, the proposal, including both in the EU sustainable finance taxonomy, we covered this relentlessly, a system for labeling climate-friendly investments. Well, it's not climate-friendly if you're going to use the climate emission machines. Right? The Greens, the Socialists, and the Democrats have all confirmed by Wednesday deadline they'll file a motion to reject the rules. Other groups may have already done the same. Nuclear reaction golfing us dry, let them play. Wasn't sure what the hell I was going on here. There's the mining of uranium, of course, the waste issue. Promoting nuclear risk to reduce greenhouse emissions is the classic jump from the frying pan into the fire, which is really good, actually. Ah, yes. And Defense One, military site. I didn't realize that till I landed on it. Oops. Let's correct a misconception about nuclear monitor. Where was it? Oh yeah, right now I remember the story. Chairman and ranking member of the House Armed Services Strategic Forces Subcommittee. Right? They always got to have these long acronyms. we believe it is important to correct the false impression about a small, important component in the American nuclear arsenal. 5 months ago, almost half a year ago, the Washington Post published an article. It took you half a year to get around to it. An article about a new nuclear weapon fuse. The mechanism that detonates the fuse. The mechanism that detonates the warhead on the right time and place. And production of new fuses for the Navy's submarine-launched ballistic missiles, which they can't use. Because if they launch it, it's game over for their families and themselves. You can't cash the checks on Friday anymore. Reaches a new milestone last July, and the Air Force's intercontinental ballistic missiles will soon follow suit. They're getting new fuses. Sandia National Laboratory, who I unbelievably despise, by the way, employee, what was the cancer rates down there? It was mad, right? Put it, a U.S. nuclear weapons always works when we want it to and never when we don't. And maybe focusing on this one post article is making a mountain out of a molehill. We'll never know for sure whether our competitors took note. But false impressions tend to take on lives of their own. When it comes to our nuclear arsenal, we need to get the facts right. Well, the fact is, you can't use them. You don't even need to put nuclear bombs in them. Just build your stupid submarines and your stupid missiles. Don't put nuclear into it in case you sink and all die and you pollute the planet and kill everybody else. Just go out there and play around with your toys. Your billion-dollar toys. Russian planes in Swedish airspaces were equipped with nuclear weapons. So why did it take so long for them to say that, I wonder? Because this happened around... we'll see coming up anyway. Sweden is not a member of NATO, but has been drawn closer to the bloc, the UK bloc by, or the EU bloc by Ukraine war. Apparently everybody's business now. Shows Russia jets violating Swedish airspace on the 2nd of March. So that's the 2nd of March. And now the 30th of March, you're claiming they had nuclear weapons. 28 days later. 2 Russian planes that flew through the Swedish airspaces at the beginning of the month were equipped with nuclear weapons, a Swedish television network has reported. As recently as February, they buzzed 3 U.S. Navy planes in the Mediterranean. 3 U.S. Navy planes in the Mediterranean. I remember that. I didn't cover it, but I remember reading it. In a bizarre speech after Russian troops crossed into the neighboring sovereign territory, 24th of February, Russia President Vladimir Putin, also known as Little Stalin, warned those who would oppose him. People should know Russia's response will be immediate and lead you to consequences you never encountered in your history. Now, if Ukraine had nuclear weapons, he wouldn't invade, obviously, right? And then the nuclear countries don't want to intervene because they don't want to get into a nuclear war. So the nuclear weapons are useless. Thank goodness. 3 days later, on the 27th of February, he said his nuclear forces to special alert. And that submarines capable of carrying ballistic missiles were also deployed in the North Atlantic. Well, we covered some of that. Again, we see this story. Again, this one is from the World Nuclear News, so it's a public nuclear lobbying group disguised as a media who never put their names on the articles on top of that. Energy Solution RSCS to decommission the nuclear scum Savannah the world's first nuclear-powered merchant ship, removing the ship's reactor system. Allegedly, the core is gone, so the vessel can be used as a museum. How much money are they going to burn on this thing? How much money have they already spent doing this anyway? Because it was only used for a few years. It was commissioned 1959 to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy as part of Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace. He should be dug up and prosecuted for what he's got done to the planet. It was a 74 megawatt reactor delivering 60 megawatts to the propeller. The reactor was operated to 80 megawatts in 1964, and he used 4.2%, 4.6% enriched uranium. It was removed from service after 8 years, having completed its mission. It wasn't economically viable. Or at least just steal everything, say. Decommissioning activities include safely removing the control rod drive system, its irradiated pressurizer, reactor pressure vessels. And that's another thing with these pressure reactors on the ocean. They're pressured at high PSI. If they go, it's like a bomb going off. Neutrons, and so if they sink under enormous pressures all of a sudden, imagine what the detonation is going to be like. There's one submarine sunk up in the Arctic from Russia, and Norwegians and Russians went there and done a study, and the Norwegian said that the reactor wouldn't breach for at least 1,000 years, 1,000 years before the reactor, it probably won't even breach then. Every other thing that sinks is rotten in 10 years. Disposal of the Energy Solutions Facility near Clyde, we're talking about their credentials. To preserve this it's not a national historic landmark, it's a nuclear industry landmark. To call it a national historic, this is the nuclear industry. It doesn't matter how much it costs, the nuclear industry will just write the check in the government's office itself. There's no Finnish city seeks to sell stake, and I can't speak Finnish, in a nuclear project, that they're going to build a nuclear power plant in Finland, but Ukraine makes it unlikely the license would be granted. So they don't have a preamble to it. So the government must resolve the matter as soon as possible, prevent the inappropriate use of public funds for the project. Nuclear industry loves this. Then you got a community now that's bankrupt. People in the nuclear industry will go down there and buy up the assets and liquidate them. Guide the nuclear deterrent in the age of great power competition, what it actually says. So the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, the Bulletin of the Unconcerned Atomic Scientists, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. They got all kinds of military. And this guy's a military, is he? At the Army Management Staff College. That's frightening that they have a college. He's director of the Army Management Staff College. That's terrifying. The Army has a college. Yeah, he's not G.I. Joe, is he? U.S. defense to its workforce, nuclear war can be won. February 2nd, 2022 article. can nuclear war be won? Yeah, there's a winner, but everybody's a loser. President Reagan faced the threat of a nuclear war that, if fought, would see the use of 65,000 nuclear weapons from the Soviet, right? 65,000 nuclear bombs, lots of them are megatons. Within the military, it is common to say we deter adversaries if possible and defeat them if necessary. So lots and lots and lots of cloak and dagger. President Biden said we will ensure our armed forces are equipped to deter our adversaries. He added that if deterrence fails, the United States will never hesitate to use force when required to defend our vital national interests, which is pretty well whatever they designated on any given morning. Firing a nuclear weapon is not an easy choice for any airman. When he doesn't make that, the President of the United States does. So you can see what the brainwashing the military is put through, right? That's extensive, isn't it? There's a lot more than that there. We're not even touching on. So they go through all of these. School theater, nuclear operation courses, nuclear weapons orientation courses. Nuclear weapons are still the primary reason nuclear armed states do not go to war. And why they constrain... No, they don't go to war against each other. They just go to war against countries that can't defend themselves. That's why they don't want any countries having nuclear, because it's too hard to go to war against them. Well, this is a common argument offered by disarmament advocates. Putin's recent threat to use nuclear weapons offer clear support of their view. As again, you can see how stuff gets leveraged all the time. Belief that the cost of action outweighs the perceived benefit. Perhaps a fictional character in a Hollywood movie explains it even better. Deterrence is the art of producing in the mind of the enemy the fear to attack. Actually, most of them use The Art of War, the book, the Chinese 3,000-year-old war book, right? They have to learn it anyway. That's part of their curriculum. Nuclear weapon mistakes and accidents never happen. I forget the context, my apologies. Our resilient Earth has experienced 2,056 above and below ground nuclear tests, and yet it hosts 7 billion inhabitants that are all dying from radioactive fallout. All the species are disappearing because of those releases. You arrogant, disgusting parasite, you. So some of these nuclear bombs, say, the Soviet Union's biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs going off at one time. So it's not accurate to say there's 2,056 bombs, right? That's not accurate. If one of them alone was equal to 3,800 of one of those bombs that they're alluding to, which, by the way, is 9.5 times as much radiation as they claim came from Chernobyl, which they claim was 400 Hiroshima bombs worth of radiation. So divide that into the Soviet Union 50 megaton, which is equal to 3,800 Hiroshimas. That's 9.5 of them worth of radiation from a single one of those above ground detonations. But the below ground detonations all split the Earth, and it's emitted anyway. All the way up into the atmosphere on top of that. Because you're talking about 1 million pounds per square inch of pressure ejecting that out of the Earth at 1 million miles a second. I have walked the test sites in both Frenchman and Yucca Flats at the Nevada test site, where many American nuclear tests were conducted, toward Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And assertions of nuclear detonation will end civilization and turn the world into a nuclear wasteland. he claims is simply not true. I've seen it with my own eyes. Yeah, the radiation in increments over decades destroys the bases of the food chain, the bases of the oxygen chain, the bases of the carbon sequestering chain. The effects are incremental. The insect starts to disappear, they become sterilized, stops reproducing, and it looks like they don't even exist because it happens almost in slow motion to the point we are today, where it's... Last year I couldn't even find a spider on research expeditions. And talk to researchers from other provinces here in Canada, and they can't find spiders. Airmen, for example, have Facebook pages. That's a stunning revelation right there, isn't it? The ICBM leg is the least expensive, most responsive, most complicating to the adversary targeting. Bombers may crash, submarines can sink. There's no question that an attack on an ICBM silo is an attack on American soil and worthy of reprisal. There's a little bit more to that one. Bear with me. The missile silos, you say? I got a couple of good examples so I can hopefully track down. Oh, there it is. Let's say so. The little dots in the black are all missile silos. Each one can have 10 warheads. And same with this one. All the red dots are missile silos. And the idea is you put all these in communities. So if they get an attack on one of those silos, the community, which the military uses as human shields, so they attacked our boys. You find out later it was the missile silo. They attacked our little community in the middle of Timbuktu. We're going to stand up for the little guys. We're going to go to nuclear war with the Ruskies. You know I'm right. Again, right? Their whole life playing around with weapons that can't be used. And they get their pensions and their children gets jobs at it and their friends... Right? It's a very lucrative life for them. All they got to do is defend that way of life every chance they get. Nuclear weapons serve as the greatest insurance policy for peace. One that can withstand failed treaties, treacherous friends, and predacious neighbors. Which they are to each other, by the way. For over 75 years, the world enjoyed what John Lewis Gott has called a long peace. Except for Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and everywhere else the military's created puppets go. So let me challenge the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which are all scumbags anyway, to host an active debate on his page between those who advocate nuclear disarmament and those who advocate a modern and robust nuclear arsenal. Are going to be people whose Friday checks is dependent upon the nuclear arsenal. Professional lawyers on top of that. The authors, university physicists, Allen and Stewart, offered their critique of the book Guide to Nuclear Deterrence in the Age of the Great Power Competitions. Well, they got to justify... trillions of dollars worldwide into the nuclear, being spent into the nuclear industry. Weapons you can't use. Their effort to cherry-pick incomplete quotes mischaracterize the arguments of more than 20 leading practitioners and experts in the more than 440 pages of the book's text deserves a rebuttal. I serve as editor and a contributing author of the guide and speak for myself in offering the discussion. The one-sided controlled opposition. Have a debate with another scumbag is not a debate. Sheffield Forge Masters claimed welding breakthrough. World Nuclear News. Celebrating 15 years of genocide and ecocide and omnicide. Using electron beam welding. This is frightening now. The company welded joint 200 millimeter thick, 3 meter diameter vessel sections. Normally takes a couple of months. They done it in less than 2 hours. Just scary news for this planet. But you got to remember, these are professional lawyers. They might have done it, but it might be useless because of the adverse effects of doing it too quick. It took 140 minutes. It normally takes a month. High-powered electron gun. That's why they call them a school of mass destructions, by the way. No nuclear fuel imports. In 2022, 133 fuel assemblies being imported in 2023. Is this India? Look at that creature there. So carbon-free, makes me want to cry. Boils off 1 million gallons a minute. Certain conditions, you can see the steam, right? You can't always see the steam. But each glass of the water, there's 1 million gallons a minute. So 16 million glasses a minute on each stacks of the cooling stacks. That's a glass of water would normally have 1 billion creatures in it. 75 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, for instance. But 1 billion creatures per glass, 16 million times 1 billion creatures, and eggs and larvae and everything. So 16 million times 1 billion creatures in each stack every minute, 1,440 minutes a day for 40 years. It's the most carbon-intensive thing in human history. You can't run it without 2 external power supplies like gas, oil, and coal plants. It can't run on its own power. It's carbon. Every facet of it is just absurd carbon. You got 1,000 or more people working there. They're all driving trucks and cars and SUVs. The minister said the government has entered into agreement with the Russia government for supply of fuel for Russia reactors. So there's somebody who's not going to say no. India has also signed agreements for uranium with Canada. Canada will give it to them if you ask. Canada's the current creature we got in control now. She's not even a human, for goodness sakes. India has 22 nuclear power reactors, and domestic uranium is used in nuclear plants which are not under the IAEA watchdog agency. So this is interesting. So the United Nations, it won't be long before they fix that. 195 militaries, they'll get their way in there. Nuclear advocates, key stakeholders respond to Diablo Canyon. A nuclear advocate is like Kathleen Higley, Ray Show talked about earlier. Everything runs downhill into the ocean on top of that, don't it? The report on, this closed in like 2013 or 14 or 15 or something. The report on Monday on the safety inspection of Diablo Canyon, fuel pools are still lethal. Identified failures by inspectors from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to properly identify issues at the decrepit facility. I don't know, one of the reactors are still running 2020. Oh, it was a flaw with the design, so they just hit it away. The negligence detailed in the report will erode the public's trust and confidence in those who are tasked with keeping everyone safe. Yeah, because if it breaks down, you got to leave your pets behind and run away. Leave your communities behind. The negligence detailed in the report will erode the public's trust. It's all about trust, man. And the university's job is to lull you into that complacency. While will white hubris lead to a nuclear holocaust? Probably. Even though the major power understands that an all-out nuclear war means mutual annihilation, possibilities of a nuclear weapons being used in the present conflict cannot be totally ruled out. We've seen that narrative a lot in the last few days, have we? The President of the U.S. added fuel. The nuclear industry is busy. The President of America added fuel to the already combustible situation when he called President Putin a war criminal and a butcher. It's Joe Biden. What do you expect? The continuous funneling of weapons into Ukraine by the United States and its allies, all the NATO countries and UN countries are doing it, will serve to extend the life of the Ukrainian conflict. I originally advocated for him to surrender. What's Russia going to do then? Keep bombing the country? Because you're not allowed to surrender, right? You're only allowed to fight till everything is destroyed and there's no future left. China, Russia, and India are all nuclear powers, and neither of these nations will allow themselves to be humiliated by the U.S. and its allies. The world will either become multipolar, as if it's not, with non-white exercising significant global power, or the hubris of the Caucasians will eventually unleash the nuclear genie in our world. Well, if you look at the people at the United Nations, there's very few white people. And the United Nations is the new world order. White people are scumbags too. They're not all like, it's like saying everybody of a color is bad. Vermont panel hears strategies to store nuclear waste in boreholes. Strategies. And they show you this unbelievable picture. You don't want to drink water from this place or eat the fruit from those forests or within 1,000 miles of these places. Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Plant. Oh, that's the one I was thinking of. That stopped working in 2013, I think. We'll see. Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee has been meeting to assess the federal policies and review potential nuclear waste storage methods. During its meeting this week, the panel heard from a company that's proposing to use borehole technology. Yeah, it's fantastic technology. They're going to dig a hole. They're going to put the nuclear waste there. We're going to run away. Problem solved. End of the world. It's the cheapest thing they can do is why do you want to do that? Monday afternoon meeting, California startup, another one, outlined plans to use existing borehole technology. I don't know why they call it a technology. It's meant to lull you again into complacency. Deep Isolation Vice President of Global Affairs and Policy, Betsy, we've covered how many times, I'm sick of even, says they're planning to dispose of nuclear waste in holes. Amazing. These people are Einsteins, Dana. You're taking drilling technology from the oil and gas sector that's obsolete and used sort of all around the world, and where you're going to use it to dispose of nuclear waste. Once it melts down, it melts down. There's such lunatics, the whole industry. It makes sense to put nuclear waste in a hole, says the crazies. The drill comes down, drills all the way to the subsurface, and actually emplaces the canister. Reminded of earthquake activity following fracking operations, committee member Weinman questioned the proposed drilling process. Are there any places you're looking at that absolutely should not be used? You said you could put this technology in almost anywhere. Who's actually setting the regulations and overseeing the process? Oh, that'll be the crazies. the Nuclear Non-Regulatory Commission, and the crazy lunatics at the Environment Protection Agency. They must laugh about that all the time. Environment Protection Agency. The same regulators you would see for Yucca Mountain, you would use for the Yucca Mountain. They spent $20 billion on litigation. Wealthy stock trader resentenced for deadly fire in secret nuclear bunker under a home in D.C. Now, he built the bunker because the media said North Korea was going to get him. North Korea was going to launch a nuclear missile and was going to get him. And so he got a young man to dig a hole. The man ended up dying in a horrific way. And he got a 9-year sentence for really terrible conditions. They just reduced it to 5 years. He's been in jail for 3 years. And his son died an incredibly cruel death. You got to be wary of some of this stuff, of course, right? Chernobyl employee says Russian soldiers had no idea what the plant was and called their behavior suicidal. It suffered a reactor meltdown, nuclear power plant meltdown. You won't see that written very often. 1986, anniversary is next month on the 26th. That left dangerous high radiation levels in the area, well, all over the world. Chernobyl actually changed the sex ratio of humans right across Europe. More males than females, which is going to be true for the insect and animal and bird world too, in the entire EU. Some soldiers reportedly never heard about the disaster, which is not really surprising. Well, they went into a heavily known radiated area, and were breathing in the radionuclides. Big convoy of military vehicles driving through zones so contaminated with radiation that even trained safety workers at Chernobyl are not allowed to go there. So they said they're going to get radiation poisoning from doing it. I said that when it originally happened. I talked about all of this, but they waited a whole month. Avoiding nuclear war over Ukraine, an op-ed. Better alive than going to the grave with Vladimir Putin. In order to protect the lives of hundreds of thousands of American soldiers who were fighting their way from the south of Japan to Tokyo, this is Nagasaki, Hiroshima they're talking about, the bombs had to be used, they claimed. In fact, we now know from well-regarded historians that this was not the most important argument that persuaded Truman to give the order to bomb. It was the fear that the U.S. wartime ally, the Soviet Union, invading from the north, would get to Tokyo first if the U.S. didn't immediately intimidate Japan to surrender. I think that's the first time I heard that version, myself personally. At the time of the Korean War, and so I don't really believe it, but at the time of the Korean War, Truman again nearly used nuclear weapons. Well, the Korean War was United Nations, right? That's what the Korean War. It wasn't a war. It was a policing. If you asked all the dead people, it was definitely a war. Truman again nearly used nuclear weapons to halt the Chinese. And we covered some of those stories over the years of the generals that wanted to use the nuclear when Truman, but was dissuaded by Winston Churchill. Really, Winston Churchill? During the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon and the Secretary of State Henry Kissinger thought seriously about using nuclear weapons against the North. North Korea, China, Vietnam. Come on, let's nuke them. They got like country and western songs. You know, it's madness when you think about it. It's madness. Let me see if I can find one of them real quick for you. Because usually I got them sitting there somewhere.
There will soon be an end to this cold and wicked war when those hard-headed communists get what they're looking for. Only one thing that will stop them, and they're a ferocious fun. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb, there'll be fire, dust, and metal flying all around, and the radioactivity will burn them to the ground. If there's any commies left, they'll be all on the run. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb.
That wasn't the only one. I got lots of them. I'm not going to play them tonight for you, but YouGov asked its sample what they would think if Iran attacked an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, killing 2,000 military personnel. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal an aircraft carrier? Again, I can't remember. And the U.S. retaliated with airstrikes and a ground invasion. 56% majority of those polled agreed that if Iran did not then surrender, a nuclear strike was acceptable. Even women did not think differently. It's an amazing statement. If there was a Russian nuclear attack, it would probably be, to begin with, the use of a nuclear small battlefield nuclear weapon. Hang on. 20% the size of Hiroshima, killing a mere 10,000 people. Excuse me. Might be enough to provoke the U.S. to retaliate with a similar weapon. They're actually crazy when you think about it. They burnt down every community in North Korea. North Korea could rapidly restore access to a yet unused tunnel. So what? Iran can't be trusted. Why would they trust you? In 2015, Iran would limit its work on developing nuclear weapons in exchange for economic sanctions relief. And they released billions of dollars in Iranian assets that was stolen. So earlier this month, Iran released 2 British Iranian prisoners to get their hands on $515 million. In return, the U.S. would unfreeze $7 billion of Iranian cash in South Korean banks. They're insane, actually, aren't they? How would a nuclear winter impact food production? Well, we hadn't, like the Soviet Union's 50 megaton bomb, that's a nuclear war, right? That's 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. They had many of these megaton bombs. So, like, if Russia and China shoot 1,800 nuclear weapons each at the same spot, is that a nuclear war? It didn't black out the sky for 10 years. Right? This nuclear war is a fable. It's radioactive fallout. It kills you. You can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up. But it kills everything in increments over time. Japan governor asked the government to boost nuclear plant security because of Ukraine, right? Protect nuclear power plants from any armed attack. The association made the request in an emergency proposal because of Russia's attack in Ukraine. Well, Russia wanted to attack the reactors. They would have attacked the reactors. If Russia wants to flatten Ukraine, they'll just go ahead and flatten Ukraine, right? There's an agenda right there we're talking about. There we go. Coming around a little bit here. Just gotta go. I have to turn on the embedding for the video, right? Moody upgraded $2 billion of a nuclear project bonds. So they got 1,000 ways to get their money, don't they? Local peace groups support state legislation on nuclear weapons. Now, what that should have said was local peace groups support state legislation banned on nuclear weapons and state investments. Because it's very deceiving when you see it that way right there, isn't it? Our country would be so much stronger if we spent more money eliminating poverty, investing in education and housing, rather than in creating, maintaining weapons to prove our might and our ability to annihilate other nations. So they had a fantastic event, apparently. I'm going to watch the videos tonight and tomorrow. Local peace groups support state legislation on nuclear weapons and state investment in war. Banned. See, it keeps missing, don't it? Weapons of mass destruction are not making the world safer, as we can see in the hands of a tyrant. They enabled tyranny, and they put all the people of the world in danger, particularly innocent civilians with scarce resources. Yet our government spends billions maintaining powerful weapons. In democracies, we have the right and obligation to stand up and say that it's not the will of the people, and that the powerful message behind these bills, because you got a bill to ban investments of pensions in nuclear weapons and that. That's absurd that didn't already exist, isn't it? Well, it's still going to get passed. They steal the pensions and invest it in nuclear. When Fukushima happened, the Canadian government invested the Canadians' pensions in uranium stocks for India. Try wrapping your mind around that one. So I'm going to watch all those videos tomorrow. See what's up. Under H7482 S2589, which is supported by the State Treasurer, State Investment Commission, which oversees the state employees' retirement funds. The state's employees would have 6 months from the date of the bill's passage to identify all military weapon manufacturers in which the pension funds owns direct or indirect holdings. Nuclear industry is just, it's unbelievable what it's doing. It's unbelievable. That's unbelievable that their pension funds are used for that. And it's a resolution urging the federal government to spearhead a global effort to prevent nuclear war by renouncing the option of using nuclear weapons in a first strike, ending the president's sole authority to launch a nuclear attack, and taking nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. I like it. Both bills are supported by a dozen local national organizations that include, and you can see a huge list. Bless their hearts. Really, right? Thank you for doing that. Why the London Underground couldn't be used as shelter if a nuclear bomb hit. They'd done that in World War II, apparently. Nuclear warheads would cause damage above, below the ground if they landed on the city directly and would cause fatalities into the millions. Additionally, radioactive contamination would enter the fresh air vents, leading to many people dying of radiation sickness. Scary stuff, isn't it? And then the tunnels are permanently contaminated on top of that. Radioactive contamination enters the fresh air vents, so the vents now are permanently contaminated. From the stations below ground, those not immediately killed by the explosion are likely to die excruciating deaths from radiation sickness. This may last years. The Thames River is likely to breach and flood the tunnels on top of that. I like this one, eh? Vladimir Putin is hiding. I said that last night, didn't I? Vladimir Putin is hiding in a secret underground nuclear bunker. Evidence has emerged. The Russian president and his high commander are hiding in bunkers east of Moscow amidst fear of a nuclear war. It would be alarming if that's true. This tells the story too. Next Russian fuel supply complicates Natrium's schedule. Natrium is supposed to be a clean, green, too cheap to meter new type of reactor. This is TerraPower, Bill Gates, and a number of them, right? Already faces an ambitious 7-year schedule to permit, construct, commence operations for his inaugural Natrium nuclear power plant in the coal mine town. TerraPower, co-founded, backed by war criminal, crimes against humanity, Microsoft billionaire Bill Gates. I didn't think it was doable before the monkey wrench was thrown in. Union of Unconcerned Scientists, Director of Nuclear Power Safety, and degenerate scumbag Edwin Lyman said, "I don't think this reactor can be licensed with the same degree of safety and assurance as the current fleet under such a accelerated timeline. But it requires more potent, more radioactive fuel than what's fed the nation's current nuclear power fleet. The Natrium design requires helium fuel, which is enriched to nearly 20%. Dirty dogs, eh? And these types of reactors produce a lot of radioactive water and other emissions, and you can't get rid of the fuel after. They're like, no, we're going to dig a hole, just drop the whole thing down in the hole. Hisashi Uchi suffered his history's worst radiation burns. Then doctors kept him alive for 83 excruciating days against his will. That sounds about right. We're talking about the nuclear industry, so I'm not really surprised or nothing. After a fateful accident at Japan's Takemura nuclear power plant in 1999, Hisashi Uchi lost most of his skin. He began crying blood before his agony finally ended. It began on September 30th, 1999, at the nuclear power plant in Japan, where an obscene lack of safety measures and abundance of fatal shortcuts, yet determined to meet a deadline, the Japanese nuclear fuel conversion company told Uchi and 2 other workers to mix a new batch of fuel. They accidentally poured 7 times the amount of uranium into an improper tank, and Uchi was standing directly over the vessel as the gamma shine flooded the room, while the plant and local villages were evacuated. I didn't know this story. Kept in a special radiation ward to protect him from hospital-borne pathogens, Hisashi Uchi leaked fluids and cried for his mother. He regularly flatlined from heart attacks, only to be revived at the insistence of his distraught family. His only escape would be a final cardiac arrest 83 days later. Interest soars in Dundee's secret nuclear bunker following an invasion of Ukraine. Don't know. I lost it, did I? This way. The bunker would have provided a place for 80 men and women, ROC volunteers, to measure nuclear blast waves and radioactive fallout. Between 1956 and 1965, 9-year period, the UK government ordered the construction of 1,563 monitoring posts at a distance of about 15 miles apart. Wow. Internal realignment positions Argonne for maximum applied science impacts. Argonne National Laboratory is built on one of the America's biggest freshwater aquifers, and it's irradiated beyond any use for 1 million years. U.S. Department of Energy, all of these national laboratories are built on aquifers. In case of a meltdown, it goes down, ends up, stays, that's their old shit plan, see? Has created 2 new applied sciences technology research organizations, the United States Department of Energy, also known as the Genocide Machine. Lauren Kovitz, most recently a director of the Strategic Security Science Division at Argonne National Laboratory, has 20 years' experience in laboratories as nuclear reactor analyst, nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear material safeguards. Never been to Fukushima, though, or Santa Susana, or none of their employees were with the Fukushima. They're part of a big machine, right? They're just little cogs in the wheels. You got to put them on a pedestal once in a while and make them feel good. Scary bunch of zeros, eh? Argonne's long-standing, world-leading expertise in nuclear genocide, decarbonization. Every opportunity they got for propaganda and for brainwashing. For more than 75 years, the nation has relied on Argonne National Laboratory for broad and deep expertise. The nation's first national laboratory conducts leading-edge basic and applied scientific research in virtually every scientific discipline. Corruption is complete. They work closely with researchers from hundreds of companies and universities. And the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Science is the single largest supporter of basic research in the physical sciences in the United States. So when people hear the words Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Department of Forestry, they don't really see the big picture. The Department of Energy, its breadth and scope in the nuclear industry, it's staggering, really. If you think about how much money it costs to run those organizations. We got a big poll tonight for everybody, big shot poll. Hope everybody likes polls. Should nuclear students have to work at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns before they can graduate? I thought that was a great idea. I thought that was that makes kind of sense. Huh. Why wouldn't we want to do that? You got 80% says yes, 20% says no. So this is 3 shows in a row where they spam the opposite of the appropriate answer. Yes, worldwide helium shortage. We've seen this every decade now. The nuclear industry does that because it wants all the helium, see? Worldwide helium shortage hits University of Windsor, Canada laboratory and area businesses. So these people have a balloon business, they can't get it. But the nuclear industry will get their helium. Please spare us the swashbuckling. One poll last week showed that 30% of us want our country to do more to intercede in Ukraine, even if it risks a nuclear war with Russia. Well, the TV told you to. From where I live, there's 80, 90 million refugees created every year. No outcry, but all of a sudden there's an outcry. It's an agenda, what we're seeing. From where I live, east of Chernobyl, we can get in my pickup, head north and east, and probably drive by a dozen missile silos before lunch. Maybe more. So another 300 located in South Dakota, Montana. I showed you a basic map of missile silos earlier, right? 2 maps, actually. And you usually can't even see them there. Just an acre of ground surrounded by a fence with menacing warning signs advertising deadly forces authorized. You poke around the site, you'll have armed guards and helicopters on top of you in minutes. 10 missiles in a silo. That's disturbing. Energy firm to increase Olkiluoto 3 capacity to over 30% in Finland. And they're going to go from 30 to 60% capacity. It took forever to get this. 13 years behind schedule was this place here. It took 13 years past the schedule. They still haven't got it up to full power. I can't remember how many billions over budget it was, but you can guess 13 years behind schedule is not because of lack of money being poured into it, but because of the incompetence of the industry and the kickbacks and thievery and space-based missile defense system would put future Putins in their place. Washington Examiner, advocating nuclear missiles up in space will stop the Putins of the future. He believes he can send his army in Ukraine to commit mass murder on scale not seen since Hitler's Germany. Really. Putin's got a long way to go to equal what he's done in Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq, right? Long way to go. Days don't count, right? India to start bulk building 10 nuclear reactors in the next 3 years. They claim they're going to build, it'll be cheaper, right? Economy of scale. BAE shipyard in Barrow set to flood due to the impact of climate change. It's just anthropogenic climate change from the nuclear industry. In other words, UK nuclear military bases are set to flood. That's a good thing, isn't it? The next generation of Trident nuclear submarines are being built in Barrow, all alongside of Southwest University backs plan for fusion power plant. Southwest University, another school of mass destruction. West County Council's business leaders, academics want to see one built in South Gloucester. University of Bristol and Bath put Cardiff University and the University of Exeter, known collectively as the G4W Alliance, written a public letter in support of the idea to create a plant. Well, it's the university gets incredible kickbacks, money, and the public that are in dire need get nothing. It's just been going on for 75 years. what we're here to talk about is the big bids, the big projects. Ukrainian authorities are demanding the members of the United Nations Security Council immediately take measures to demilitarize the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They demand that an organization has no sovereignty over any country. Manju spent nuclear fuel to be shipped to France from Japan by 2034 and completed by 2037 to France. And France is La Hague, where they reprocess this stuff, have over 500 security guards there each day. 500 security guards, so you can't see what they're doing. You can't steal it because it'll kill you. So it's to stop you from finding out how bad they're killing the planet with constant releases. The shipment process is expected to be completed in fiscal 2037. It's the Japanese for you, man. Thinking way ahead, eh? By the way, that Manjo reactor, if you break it open, there's no way to decommission it, right? If you break it open, oxygen goes in there, it detonates. If water gets in there, it detonates. How are they going to decommission that again? How's that actually work? Publicly put Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. Is pharmacy iodine effective in the event of a nuclear accident? So radioactive iodine goes in the thyroid, turns into radioactive hormones distributed out to everything in your body. Not only that, now your thyroid is incredibly radioactive. That means your thyroid gland is shot, your adrenaline gland is shot. That ain't going to be good. And for insects and birds and animals and stuff like that, they don't take iodine. Well, the U.S. is primed for a nuclear weapons spending spree. $790 billion this year. They want the same for next year. $768 billion. My apologies. You couldn't use that anywhere else in the country, could you? And in mid-February, it always goes up. It never goes down, right? It's always gouging, stealing. Always got to use all your precious metals for something you can't use. All the resources each year for something you can't use because you destroy everything. 2023 budget, they're expecting $770 billion for nuclear industry in America. A new nuclear development would be a just transition for Caithness workers in the United Kingdom. Former Donneray was a reprocessing plant in the United Kingdom. It's going to be around 300 years before it's safe to go to that site. 300 years. And so he's one of the people who made a living out of it. Argues small modular reactors should be part of Scotland's energy future. Renewables have conquered this now, right? Last year was 291 gigawatts came online in 12 months. It's equal to 333 nuclear power plants in 12 months. Imagine if you put compressed air storage and wind storage with that stuff. Game over, right? Energy Northwest engineer shares what it means to be a woman in nuclear. Yeah, because you never would let women in there. They wanted it all from themselves. Now they want women in there to try to make them look like they're humans. Nuclear power. Government invests in privatized power plants. Privatized power plants. There's a bad idea. East London Socialist Party. The Johnson government is stepping up its commitment to expand nuclear power with the announcement it will take a 20% stake in the new Soswell Sea, which is built right in the middle of major farmland, as far as you can see. Pressure water reactors, high pressure reactors. In reality, government is trying to prop up France's deeply flawed nuclear power program in the United Kingdom. Exactly. The existing 8 stations were already sold to EDF after Labour privatised British Energy in 2007. These old reactors are coming to the end of their useful life and are due to be phased out by 2030. So under the deal, EDF is guaranteed a wholesale price for its nuclear energy. Gouging price, I should add. More than double the cost per kilowatt hour compared to renewables. So Hinckley's C must be the most expensive government job creation program in history. And it's conceivable it won't even start at all. In 2020, it was 5 times over budget. 5 times over budget. Just endless thievery on top of that, which is good for the planet, by the way. Ukraine seeks a deal guarantee armies with nuclear components will intervene if it's attacked again. It wants NATO and United Nations. Look at the face on her, man. Where's my tea? Ukraine's... You'll destroy Ukraine and then Putin said, well, I don't want it. Now it's destroyed. And the people can never come back. The plain language of the economic wise leave the nuclear power plants on the grid. That's Germany. Is there any reason to leave the 3 nuclear power plants that are still in operation in Germany connected to the grid and reactivate the ones that are already closed? Well, Angela Merkel is gone. The nuclear industry is hard at work, right? And who wrote this astounding... An introvert, a beer guru, a communicator, a travel fanatic, a web advocate, a certified alcohol geek, a TV bluff, and a subtly charming internet moron. The nuclear industry writes the article, people like him puts their name on it, his audience is now indoctrinated into the idiot machine. What we don't need is more anti-nuclear fear-mongering. Fear-mongering. Well, as we speak, nuclear scientists all over the world are in their basements. Mom, come down. Dana's fear-mongering again. I'm too tired to fear-monger again. Been a long day. Been a long night. Afraid to look to see what time it is. Let's have a look anyway, because I'm stupid. Good God. It's 10 after 1 in the morning. How did our poll do anyway? Oh, that'll cheer me up. 76 votes. Score. I got, should nuclear students have to work at the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns before they can graduate? Why would anybody say no? Why would you say no? Send them to the nuclear meltdowns, for God's sakes. Give the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language some time off, you party poopers. 77 votes. We're going to end the poll shortly. Another few moments. We made it through the news cycle. I'm still alive. I'm doing fine, I think. Where am I to? I wonder. There we go. Jacob, Cody, Albert, Shayla White. Yeah, good night, Shayla. Dana Nasana. Hi, everybody. Thinker, Timber, Optic, Obsolete Optics. There's links at the bottom of my description if people do want to donate. Maybe I can show you that before the show's over. This is a video you're watching currently at this exact moment. If you scroll down under my video, the last two links, and there's a lot there tonight, scroll right down to that link there and this link here. It's directly to Dana on PayPal and directly to my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. And so Dana Ryan Durnford, you can donate directly to me there. And at my website, let the page load up. Underneath that picture, there's a donate button for credit cards. You can donate that way. Yeah, that was in that poll, I guess. Let me see. Shout out for a few people, because most of the comments won't show up on the inside of my thing. John Schiffet, hi John. Thinker. Show your strawberry picture. I haven't seen it. I have to go look for it. Sheila. James Lucette. Hi, James. James donated 60 last night. I got that, James. Thank you. And that's a huge deal. They get, because we spent so much on tools over the last month, I guess now. Amazing, eh? The tools. It changes everything. Yeah. Good night, Stephen Young. Hugs for you, my friend. Shane Clark. I'm just going to do a quick shout out. Show's over, and for me, it's just a way of winding down. It's hard just to shut down when you do so much work, and then you got to sit here and present everything, and you're doing it live, so you're not allowed to make any mistakes. Darlene. That's the hard part where it's live. The idea of live is so that anybody new can say, hey, wait, this is recent. And we might have a future for humanity and the 8 million species. So it's a lot of work, and I don't mind it. I'm not complaining. And Warren, like you say, the comments, I'll only get about half the original comments. So I might not get everybody that was here earlier. I do read the comments after, though. And tonight's over a 3-hour show, so I might not read them till tomorrow. Let me see. I'm just Albert. I'm looking for anybody I didn't shout out. Peaceware. That happened to be in the comments section. I'm almost through the comments. We'll come back down. I'm going to stop the poll in a few seconds, because I'm almost through whatever comments I got access to. John Curtis. There we go. We're almost through. Lots and lots of great stories today and tonight. Just amazing. Amazing amount of documentation this week. Kevin Blanche. So we got 77 votes. We're going to end that poll. 77 votes. 81% said nuclear students should have to work at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns before they can graduate. I mean, who should really work at nuclear meltdowns if not the nuclear students, right? I'm just quickly scanning the most recent comments to see if there's anybody there that I might have missed that I didn't already quickly shout out. Because the show's over, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, thank you again, Dana Nasana. Appreciate it. Just in case the industry was going to troll us. Yeah, okay, well that's it then. God bless everybody. Hopes everybody have a great night, great day tomorrow. Tomorrow's the end of the week for me. I start my shows on Sunday. So hopefully the nuclear cycle's not going to be too crazy tomorrow. It'll be what it's going to be, right? Nothing I can do about it. Adrian Johnson. I won't be checking my emails until tomorrow, Shayla. I'm burnt out. I haven't stopped all day, and I got a bunch of projects running at the same time in the garage. We're getting shit done, though, aren't we? Since I got the tools, it's a lot easier to start doing what I'm doing. Pretty motivated, right? Okay, good night, everybody. God bless. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for the last show of the week. Take care, folks.